Purpose of this video is to serve as a refresher for maybe tellers or teammates who are new to the ATEC TCR or haven't had this in a while, and also for technicians who perhaps haven't given a teller TCR learning session in quite a while. So we'll start with the very basics of the TCR. As we think about it, it really has three parts. It has a user interface here up top, which is the screen. We'll go through that in a minute. It has this entire area that we call the CAM, or Customer Access Module. There are three pockets in it, much like a three-pocket bill counter. So the very bottom pocket is what we call the CAM input. That's how it's referred to in many middlewares and integrations. That's where you put your notes to go into the machine. There's a middle pocket here. We call that the CAM feeder, as it's called in many middleware as well. That's where notes come out on a dispense. And at the very top, we have the CAM reject. And that's where notes go that the TCR doesn't recognize as money. So that could be a deposit slip, or it could be a suspect note. The bottom section of the TCR is the vault section. We'll start with the CAM in the middle section, and we'll go from there. To power on an ATEC TCR from its off position, you want to lift up this switch guard here, and you'll press the top of the rocker switch and turn it into the on position. So this just makes the power supply ready to start. It doesn't actually turn the TCR on. So the way to turn a TCR on, there are a couple things. One, there's this black button here, and you'll see the teller lights up on the top. So we press and hold this button until these teller lights turn solid. So they blink about 3 or 4 times. And as soon as it goes solid there, I can now let go of that button, and the TCR will start normally, is what we would expect. I'll save a little bit of time, and you can just take my word for it that that TCR is going to start. And we'll transition over to the other one and see how to shut one down in the proper way. So it's not exactly the reverse, but pretty close. So to shut the TCR off, we'll do the same thing. We'll press and hold the round button down here at the bottom for a couple seconds. We can let that go. And now we've got red flashing teller lights, and we have a menu that we're presented with. If you really don't want to shut the TCR down, you would simply press cancel, and that would bring it back to the normal screen. We have an option to click close, but we really don't want to do that. That would close the TCR application, and the only option for turning the machine off at that point would be to power fail it. Not a great option. The two options that we would normally use would be restart, and that would restart the TCR. Maybe that's something that you might want to do if the TCR has some problem that you're unable to reset from. So a restart would really be a reboot. And lastly is one we want, a shutdown. So we're just going to click shutdown, and we'll see the TCR shut down. Maybe I'll speed that video up. Over there on the other side, you can probably hear the first TCR starting up. That startup takes about 2 minutes. Shutdown takes about a minute for that to happen. No need to press anything on the screen after this. The only thing we might want to do is after the screen goes completely blank and the teller lights stop flashing, it is possible that we would want to actually turn the power supply off. And we would do that by lifting up the guard and turning it to the off position. That is how you turn an ATEC TCR on and off. So to begin, we'll open the plastic cover for the vault section, and this will expose the first place of opening up the TCR. There's a lever here on the right-hand side, possibly slightly out of camera view, but it's in green, and it's just called upper, and we push that lever down, and that allows us to rack out the entire upper module of the TCR. So important things to know as we even start here, you are looking at the entire bill path of the TCR. There's no bill path in the safe. This is the entirety of it. So you're looking at actual 3 bill paths, an upper, a middle, and a lower bill path. We'll talk about like each one of those to start. To start to look for a jam, first you would have been notified by the user interface, the screen, where a jam was. We'll cover that a little bit later as we get to the user interface and all of its functions. To open up the TCR to begin to look for a jam, the instructions are printed here. And we like to say that this is, much like a copier or a printer, things that you're already used to that have green labels on them that show you that they're safe. And most of these modules have both a latch and a handle on them. So as an example, the first step of opening is A1 up and A3 up. So here's A1, that is the latch, and here's A3, that's the handle. So this allows us to tilt the cam up and out of the way. So if you were instructed by the screen to look in this area, you would have tilted the cam up, and now you have access to where the bills actually flow down here, and here when they flow into the actual bill path, which is the start of it, we call the middle module. For technicians, this is where you'll find coins at these very bottom 3 translucent rollers at the bottom. And for tellers and teammates, you will look in this area too and see if you see anything. If you do find a coin there, more than likely you're going to need the assistance of a technician. While we're in this area, one of the most effective troubleshooting tools that you have as a teller or teammate is this green wheel that allows you to turn the entire drivetrain of the TCR. So if there were a note stuck in any of these paths, you would hear it either moving or you would hear that it's somewhat stuck in there, and you would know better where to look. So that's an important tool. The next thing that it tells us is to move D10 up. So D10 doesn't have a latch, it only has the handle. So that is D10 up. The third step it tells us is B1 push. This is the most difficult as you're training tellers because it's this handle here and it is bladed towards the teller. So we push this down, that is the latch, and then this is the handle, and we just push the TSK out of the way. The last thing that it tells us is C3 up. So again, this one only has a handle, no latch. And so now we've pulled all the modules out of the way so that we can troubleshoot. So each of these modules has also green levers. We can lift those up to see if there are like any notes that are stuck in any of these places. Some open a lot, like these. Others don't open that much. Here's one that doesn't open so much, but it still affords a really great view of anything that might be stuck in there. So again, you would be looking for a bill or a note that's stuck in here, and the user interface would have told you where to look. As the more likely place that you'll find a note actually is here in this middle bill path. So notes that are coming into the TCR for the first time go in the cam input, they flow through this very front part of the middle module, and then they enter the middle bill path here. And so this is kind of a squat down and take a look, but at the very front of this, you will see there's some, maybe you'll see, there are some spring-loaded set of fingers that help guide notes through this middle part of the bill path. This module, it has no sensors, it only has note transport belts, very easy to look in that, very few problems here. And then this third one down here is the bill validator. It's commonly referred to as the BV, and we refer to this as the brains of the TCR. So E1 lift is how this is opened, and you would look in here to see if you find a bill or a bill fragment, possibly a coin or a paper clip or even a rubber band we've seen in here before. This is also a place where a teller would clean on a weekly basis. So every Friday you would get a microfiber cloth and you would clean these 4 glass strips, 2 on the bottom. There's also 2 on the top exactly like it. And if you're industrious, there's 2 little metal strips in the back that you would also want to wipe off with your microfiber towel. And that really is all that is required on a weekly basis from a teller. When closing the BV, we don't want to slam it. It is a sensitive piece of equipment, so we lay it down and then we want to make sure you hear the audible click. So firm, but gentle at the same time. And then as you continue to look back, you would just look here behind the BV, and that's really the last place that you can look that requires you to look into this level. If there were a jam on the lower bill path, what we often suggest is for teammates or tellers to take out their phones, put them in selfie mode, and hold them under here, and that will show you if there are any notes sticking out. So there are several diverters under here. I'm not sure if that shows up on camera, but each of these can be open and bills can be looked. So you might you might see a technician laying on his back, looking underneath there to look for any kind of jams or notes sticking out. If there were, you would hear them when you racked out the TCR, you would hear them dragging at the top of the safe and making a sound kind of like when we were kids with cards and our bicycle spokes. There is one last place to look as we close all of this up, and that might be that you would take a look in the back of the safe in this area back here, where you can actually see the slots where notes go from the lower part of the bill path and actually through the top of the safe and into the cassettes. So we'll take a look at that later, but you wouldn't expect to find much in there, but you could possibly find a coin, possibly a rubber band, or a bill fragment that might be causing a problem. To continue closing the upper module, this is one of the more difficult parts, so we just push forward a little bit, take a little pressure off, and hold this kickstand and let this module come back. And similarly, we just push the cam forward, take a little pressure off, and ride that kickstand down until it's closed. At that point, we can really just rack the upper module back into the TCR. One of the important parts of the upper bill path that we need to cover is this module here, which is called the divert bin or the temporary stacker. That's often abbreviated as TSK. The purpose of this module is to store notes that the TCR had a problem with, like they were double picked or they were bent or folded during a customer dispense. So only on a dispense would notes flow into here, but in the event that there was something wrong with a note picked out of a cassette or something happened along the bill path, it would be stored in this divert bin. It's counted by the machine, it would be shown on the user interface screen, and if you're not able to empty the cassette bin using your middleware or integration, then you would just use the cassette key. So you would just stick the cassette key in the lock down here. You don't need to separate it, and just like a cassette, it uses the cassette key. You would open the back of the TSK and you would just check in. In this case, you might even see that there is like a folded note in here. So we would simply remove all the notes that we see in the TSK. And in almost all cases, the middleware or direct integration that you're using would ask you how many notes you got out of the TSK. If you were clearing a jam, the next thing that you would do would be to either press the reset button on the screen, or even better, press the reset button that is in your middleware or integration, and that you would expect that the TCR would try to purge itself if there were still notes in there, but it would come back to you normally or present you with an error code of some other problem. We're going to move to the vault section. So we're going to open the plastic door and move that out of the way. Some applications have dual controls where it takes more than one teammate to open the vault. Others just have singles. This one happens to be single. So you would enter your code, you would rotate the lock clockwise, and at that point, you can open the vault itself. Exposing the cassettes, there are really two options with a 380. The first option is that you can press this green button on the left, and that will only expose the operational cassette. This would be useful if you're bleeding off notes and you want to walk back to the main vault with this cassette, or if you're supplementing notes and you want to take this back to the vault, load different notes in it, put it back in the machine, and supplement the machine as well. So many purposes here. The general purpose of the operational cassette is to serve as an overflow if you have too many ones or fives or any denomination. That is one difference between this machine and the larger capacity machine, the 450. The 450 doesn't have that feature at all. Also, unlike the 450, to open this machine and rack out all the cassettes requires a key. The 450 doesn't. Once you have vault access, then you can rack out all of them without a key. So there's 6 cassettes that you'll find in the lower part of this machine. They can be in any order, except the operational cassette has to be first. It's also true that the rear cassette of a 380 is the split cassette, which normally holds 10s and 50s, and that one does have to be in the last position. So there are two kinds of cassettes. There's the first 5, which are all single denomination cassettes. The last one is a split cassette that holds 2 denominations. And here is what that looks like and how you might troubleshoot them. So to remove a cassette, you just lift the blue handle. You would have to use a cassette key to open the door. And so what you'll see inside of this is another green piece of label that allows you to move this to the bottom and lock it. You can unlock it by either pressing this button, or as you close a cassette, it will go up by itself as well. At the end of that, if there are notes in here, you probably do want to snug them up, but you don't want to squish them in there. If you did have a cassette jam in a regular cassette such as this, the preferred method for resolving that is to roll a note out rather than to pull a note out. So let's see if I can set that up quickly for you. Okay. So here's how you might see a note that is partially in the cassette. So in order to get that out, rather than pulling it out, it would be preferable to use this silver wheel and to roll that note out to where it's no chance that you're going to tear it and leave a fragment in there. In this case, you would not put the note back into the cassette. You would load it back into the machine manually or through a deposit. So once this is resolved, we'll close the cassette and we'll just stick it back in its place. If you do find that the cassette is out of commission or broken in some way, the machine runs just fine without one or more of its cassettes. So in our case, if the one's cassette was damaged at this point, we wouldn't be able to dispense ones, but we would be able to take ones for deposit. And so you could just set that aside, continue using the machine, and wait till a technician could either repair the cassette or give you a new cassette. The other kind of cassette is a split cassette. And so this is what that looks like. There are a few differences, and it's actually easier to work with than the standard cassette. So what you'll see is it has 2 denominations. These are not spring-loaded, and they will just stay wherever you left them. So ideally, when you're finished looking in here, you would close them. Again, you don't want to squish the notes, but you would just close them such that they're snugged up against the bottom. If you had a note that was stuck in this cassette, a little bit different. I'm going to close this. We don't need to get back in there. Then, similar to the other cassette, there is a green wheel on the outside, and this allows you to roll the note out of the cassette so that you don't tear the cassette in there. And there is one other place that you would need to look, which is this rear path. It doesn't open very far, but far enough to see in. And again, if there were a note in there, you would use the green wheel. That was pretty far. That just stuck that in there. You would use the green wheel to rotate that, to roll that out of the machine. Yes, so here we go. So we've now rolled that note all the way out. Probably not a worthwhile demonstration. Again, all cassettes go back in the machine. The handle faces towards the back. Easy to remember that. There really isn't anything else to look at down here in the cassette. There would be no reason to look in there. You wouldn't see a jam in there. The only place you would see it is either at the top of the cassette or underneath the lower bill path as you rack out the upper. Putting this back in is the same as the upper, really. You really just want to push this back in. You'll hear it click. The machine will not run with the vault door open or with that out of position. So it is important to close the vault door. And this brings up an important point for the vault itself. So there's never a need to enter your combination when closing the vault door. And so there's a common problem that can occur if you haven't done this in a while. So no matter how hard you pull on this lever, you cannot turn this unless you push it in. So you push the lever in, and then it's very, very easy to turn, but it has to be pushed in. So we get calls from time to time from frustrated teammates who are trying to put their combination in, they can't close the vault, and all they really need to do is hit the push or push it in and turn the lever. So the second thing that can occur is if you haven't pushed the lever all the way up, like it looks to be locked, but you're unable to turn the lock back to the fully locked position. And so what you really need to do is make sure this is totally perpendicular to the lock, and then maybe you even need to hold up a little tension on it, and then you can turn this to the lock position. And now we're back to locked and exactly how you want to run. The TCR will run with the door open. It's not necessary that we lock that. I'm going to leave that open at this point, and we're going to talk about the user interface. When we started the TCR, we started it with the vault door open. And so here's a great example of what a technician would need to resolve the problem and what a teammate can use to solve the problem as well. So we see on the screen that it gives us a 3-digit code, an error code 124. That doesn't help technicians or teammates. But this second one, this 4-digit code, the error code detail 1204, does help. Like those are available to look up in our manuals, and we can get specific information about that. And there's also a description at the bottom that just says close vault door. So we have closed the vault door now, that is done. And what we would expect is by pressing reset, that the TCR would continue its boot up process, and you would get a normal start. And just as we expected, we got a normal startup from the TCR. So this is perfect, what we're seeing here. Like this is really a great opportunity to teach all the different codes that you could see on the TCR. I'm going to start with the green lightning bolt, as that one may go away. So that means that the TCR is trying to communicate with the tens cassette, and it's not able to do that yet. So a green lightning bolt is a communications occurrence. It could be an error. It could just take a while. What you're seeing right now is not normal, but I'm glad it is for this demonstration. You also see this red E on the ones cassette, which just means the cassette is empty. It's present, it's available, but it's empty of any notes. The fives has one blue segment to the right of it, which just indicates that it has some notes in it, and we can actually check and see how many in 1 second here. This black X in a white box means that there is no 50s cassette. So in our case, our split cassette is normally 50s and 10s, but we changed it to be 50s or 10s and 100s. You'll see the 100s here, much like the 5s above it, and 20s just has one blue segment, so it's ready to receive bills. There are no issues. It's in a normal condition with some notes in it. And you'll see an exclamation point next to the divert, which means it has been opened with cache in it. So that is the status. We call that manipulated. It's not an error. It doesn't mean that it's not ready. It really just means that the TCR can't be sure of what's in it because we opened that cassette while there were notes in it. So that will be cleared as soon as it's emptied or the TCR is audited, either way. All right, and we said that you could see exactly what's in there. So if we click inventory amount, we'll get a screen that tells us exactly how many of each denomination, both in terms of count and value, are in the TCR. Other features of the user interface are this how-to section. And so what you'll see on top are tutorials and troubleshooting. Those are both very similar. Let's run a short video. This is how you would pull a cassette out of the lower tray. It may even show us how to open it up. So this is under the tutorial section, and we'll go look at a similar video. So the tutorial really isn't so much for troubleshooting as much as it is a how-to. And so if we go back and we go to troubleshooting, we can look at a cassette jam, and that will show us much the same thing, except it also shows us how to roll notes out of the cassette as we demonstrated earlier in the video. So they're showing us the slot, they're showing us the roller, and here's how we roll a note out. Okay, so several things in there to videos to watch if you've forgotten how to do some of these things. There is the sensor status. And as we talked about that earlier, the sensor status will tell us where a note is stuck in the TCR. And to simulate that, if I just put my hand over the cam input, you'll see that we get an input light coming up. And likewise, if I go into the cam feeder, you'll see a light there. And lastly, if I put my hand into the reject box, you'll see one there. So if there were a note stuck somewhere in the TCR, it would show you exactly where it is to look so that you actually don't have to search for that. In addition to those things, there's a note path. I don't find this particularly useful, but it shows you the direction of travel. I don't think that's really helpful to teammates. It's really not helpful to technicians. We should know that. One other thing on the TCR that is helpful is a quick bill count, and that literally allows you to use your TCR as a supplemental currency discriminator. So it has two modes. Mix count is one mode that just counts the money that you put on the cam input. And it just counts however much money that you put on there. The other mode is batch count, and that actually separates out notes. So if you have a stack of 1s and 5s, and the first note that it sees is a 1, then it separates all the 1 to the cam feeder and all the 5s to the cam reject. So it really just kind of helps you to sort notes. So rudimentary functionality, but nonetheless could come in handy if you need an extra bill counter. It is important when you're in this mode that you back out of it, because while you're in the bill count mode, the TCR is not available for other teammates to use. That is a relatively quick TCR teller training and technician refresher for the LTA-380. Thank you.